Every time Jacob went up to Fifth Heaven for the night, he would take the opportunity to patrol the sky over their city. He drove snowflakes swiftly around the boundaries of First and Second Heaven. Second, Third, and Fourth Heaven were the middle territories between the dragon cultivators and the human cultivators. The human cultivators were allowed to leave the Fifth Heaven and patrol these territories. However, last time, when the two cultivators from the White Sand sect scouted below the First Heaven, they were trespassing, and the dragon cultivators on land had the right to kill them. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening, and the sky had darkened. Jacob closed his eyes and tried to feel natural essence fluctuations around him using his spiritual sense. He was not very familiar with the use of spiritual sense and could barely cover an area with a diameter of 100 meters. If he had not been in the clouds, it would have been better to watch with his eyes. However, the masters on the 8th and 7th levels, such as Susan, could sense every movement in an area with a diameter of more than a mile. He was about to end his patrol when two cultivators' presence broke into the range of his senses. Obviously, the two cultivators had sensed Jacob's presence before he'd sensed their presence, since they were fleeing. But Snowflake was faster than them. According to their experience, the dragon cultivators patrolling the boundaries in First Heaven were usually inspectors, who were the elites of the dragon clan. Most of the inspectors were the equivalent to nascent soul realm cultivators, and thus were more powerful than them. That was why they split up and fled the moment they sensed the cultivator flying up from First Heaven. However, Jacob wouldn't let them go. Two of his fingers flicked out two sets of sword energies. Each set contained a basic sword array consisting of 16 sword energies, shooting toward the two fleeing cultivators. The sword array was simple, but its power was great. Two sheets of light, one white and the other yellow, shot onto their backs. They stumbled forward about 6 meters and were severely wounded. Desperately, they sped up and shot up towards Third Heaven, so fearful that they didn't even glance back at their attacker. If they had known that the attacker was only a cultivator of the 3rd level, which is equivalent to the low-tier core formation realm, they would have regretted their decision to flee. Withdrawing the 32 sword energies, Jacob patted Snowflake's rump and continued to patrol. These two cultivators were stronger than those two who had been captured by him last time. If they hadn't fled in panic, Jacob probably would not have been their match. But it didn't matter to Jacob, since he could run away on Snowflake, whose traveling speed was equivalent to that of the nascent soul realm cultivators, and they couldn't catch up with it. In fact, it was Snowflake's horrifying speed that shocked the two cultivators and convinced them that they had encountered a dragon tribe inspector of the 8th or 7th level. Sensing the two cultivators had escaped to the territory on and above Fifth Heaven, Jacob patted Snowflake's head, and it flew up swiftly to Fifth Heaven. The ethereal summit was as peaceful as before. Snowflake carried Jacob through the thick fog into the cave. In the cave, the table and chair were the same as he had left them. However, he noticed some messy footprints on the ground of the cave. As a precaution, before he left the cave in the morning, he had spread a very thin layer of dust on the ground by the sucking and releasing the power of the sword Shadow Scroll. The footprints showed that someone had come in when he was not there. Since it was on Fifth Heaven, he was sure the intruders were cultivators from some nearby sect. Jacob had been wondering why no cultivators had built a cave in this valley full of essence. Thinking it was a forbidden rear mountain of some sect, he had borrowed a set of array formations from Noah and was about to build it there. But it seemed that someone had discovered his cave. The cultivators had been cautious about the array formations in and out of the cave, and thus had concealed their nature essence fluctuations. They didn't realize that the owner had used a simple anti-theft method of the mortal world. From the shallow footprints, Jacob could determine the exact number of the intruders, but he was sure there had been more than 3 of them. "Snowflake, guard me well tonight," Jacob said to Snowflake. Snowflake looked at him and barked. Jacob didn't know if he had understood his order or not. He had to speed up his cultivation process and thus didn't want to desert this perfect cultivation spot, or waste his time finding another mountain with abundant essence. After all, it was nighttime, and he'd probably stumble into an array formation of some sect. Brushing the dust off the stone bed, he closed his eyes and began to cultivate. Lying at the entrance of the cave, Snowflake looked around cautiously. With its acute sense of smell, it had sniffed the scents of strangers in the cave. Even cats and dogs didn't like strangers trespassing on their territory, let alone a spirit beast. Outside the valley, 2 figures flew in the night, guarding the cave from a distance. The moon rose, and then descended slowly. When dawn came to Fifth Heaven, Jacob slowly exhaled a turbid breath, feeling 3 new openings had been unlocked in his fast-spinning dragon core. 70 openings. The nature essence stored in his body had increased exponentially. For the dragon cultivators, the higher the cultivation realm, the more difficult it would be to unlock openings. That was why they would have to find a mystical crystal to help them reach the higher levels. These so-called mystic crystals were like transfer stations of the essence. They could store enough essence for the cultivators to achieve breakthroughs. Jacob had never managed that he'd be able to unlock 5 openings in 2 days. He was convinced that this valley was his lucky place, and he would never give it up to anyone. Kicking hard on the ground, he rushed out of the cave while a white energy sword appeared under his feet, carrying him to patrol around the valley. Flying on an energy sword consumed a lot of nature essence. But Jacob had just gained a breakthrough. The essence intensity in his blood was very high. Thus, he didn't care about the essence he wasted on the energy sword. The valley had an oval shape with a U-shaped vertical dissection surface, like an eggshell with one opening. This valley would have been a perfect place for defending in ancient times. However, in Fifth Heaven, all the cultivators could fly, and this feature of the valley was not an advantage here. The upside was that its funnel shape could accumulate essence in the fog, making the essence intensity much greater than outside. With the features of the valley in mind, Jacob took out the set of array formations he got from Noah and placed the compass, which looked like a plate and was the eye of the array, in the cave before planting 72 array flags evenly on the edge of the valley. The instructions for building the array formation were written on the inner side of the box lid. All Jacob needed to do was follow the steps in the instructions. Except for the nascent soul realm cultivators who could break the array with pure force, ordinary cultivators flying or walking couldn't enter the valley. With the vast array flag planted into the soil, the fog in the valley got even thicker, and the visibility of the valley decreased by almost 5 times. Jacob flew out of the valley and tried to enter it. However, when he rushed in on the energy sword, he looked up and found himself on the other side of the valley. He turned around and tried again. The result was the same. He rushed into the fog and ended up on the other side of the valley. It seemed like the valley didn't exist at all. Jacob wondered about the miraculous effects of the array formation and took out a tiny star, which was the array heart, that was made of deep ocean crystal. It had a deep blue color. He injected some nature essence into it, and the small crystal gave off a vague bluish green light. He flew into the fog on the energy sword, and this time he entered the heart of the valley. "Excellent!" Jacob exclaimed in appreciation. Noah was an overbearing kid, but his stuff was excellent. According to him, this array formation he gave Jacob was just an entry-level array. When he went back to the cave, Snowflake looked at Jacob with bafflement. Sitting in the center of the array formation, it had watched Jacob fly around outside of the valley. The coffee-colored compass was on the stone table in the cave. It looked to be made of ancient wood, but when he shifted it in his hand, he found it was heavier than metal. The compass was made of deep ocean crystal, too. Circles of rune were engraved on the surface. Placing the tiny blue star into the small dent in the center of the compass, Jacob found they fit perfectly. With the array heart and the array eye, they could automatically control the array formation in the valley. The outer and inner edges of the compass could turn, and the different positions they turned to signified different features of the array. Right now, Jacob used the basic feature by rotating the rings on the compass to their original positions. He injected a little nature essence into the compass, and the thick fog in the valley immediately vanished. By doing this, he had temporarily withdrawn the array formation. After turning the 2 rings of ruins to random positions, he took the array heart from the compass. Plucking a golden fur from Snowflake's paw, he attached the array heart to the thread of hair and made them into a simple bracelet before pulling it onto his wrist. When its fur was plucked off, Snowflake whimpered and looked at Jacob morosely. Jacob just smiled at him. He used Snowflake's hair because it was harder than ordinary red thread and could resist the damage of water and fire. Attached to the hair of Snowflake, the bracelet wouldn't break. Let's go back, patting Snowflake on its head. Jacob got it up from the ground and walked to the entrance of the cave. Snowflake wagged its tail and moved closer to his legs before turning into a snow line. No one would break into the ethereal summit, which was under the protection of the Big Dipper Constellation array. Relaxed, Jacob smiled and got up on Snowflake's back, petting its big round head comfortingly.